we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars for highly qualified, highly intelligent professionals that have a lot at stake.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Adam Nessum Show. Today we have an awesome guest that's going to be really helpful for any pre-meds, med students, and resident and maybe even attending physicians that are still trying to pay back their student loan debt. Today we have Rob Bertman, who holds both a CFA and CFP designations and is a University of Michigan alum. He loves helping borrowers as a senior consultant for student loan planner and specializes in making plans for professionals with $200,000 to $400,000 of household student loan debt. When Rob isn't working on student loans, he helps parents find money in their budget to save, invest, and pay back debt, even if the cost of raising kids is breaking the bank. Rob has 3 kiddos himself and enjoys playing basketball, watching superhero movies, and being active in the community. So thanks so much, Rob, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adam. Happy to be here.
So can you tell our listeners a little bit about, I guess, exactly what you do and how you got started working with Student Loan Planner?
Absolutely. So I'd been in the financial industry for over 15 years as an investment analyst and financial planner. And but I realized I wanted to do something more tactically to help people on the day-to-day stuff as opposed to managing investments. And so I started my own company called Family Budget Expert. And shortly thereafter, I was in a co-working space where I met Travis Hornsby, who's the founder of Student Loan Planner. And he had just started his company trying to help 6-figure borrowers find the best ways to pay back their student debt. And so he and I had been talking, and he was telling me a little bit about student loans and how to approach them. And I had no idea. I just thought, hey, you have student debt, you treat it just like any other debt, and you pay it back just like you would any others. You just kind of get the low interest rate and throw as much as you can at getting out of debt. And I soon realized after working with him, I've been working there for the last 3 years as student loan planner, that student debt and student loan repayment operates by a totally different set of repayment rules than traditional debt. And there are so many ways that especially physicians or aspiring physicians and med students and residents can handle student debt in a way that instead of having to think, what do I have to do with my career in order to pay back my student debt? You can think about what career do I want to take and then piece around a student loan plan that will fit around the career that you want to take.
Right.
And so over the last 3 years, I've done over 800 one-on-one consults, and I've advised on over $220 million of student debt, focused mainly with, like you said, 200K plus borrowers, which a lot of doctors are in that category. So, but I quickly realized that, like I said, I mean, student loan rules are not like any other kind of debt. It's not like credit card debt. It's not like having a mortgage payment. It's not like having a car loan. It needs to have a different, you need to like different rules of engagement for dealing with student debt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things you brought up that is important is a lot of students now, especially medical students, you'll see potentially being swayed to go to a certain specialty because student loan debt's so high. So they need to go for that high paying specialty, but that shouldn't necessarily be the case, where you should be going towards that specialty or career path that you want, and then figure out how are you going to use that to pay off your student debt, even if, let's say, the salary is a little bit lower. If you're smart with your money and you have good advisors such as yourself, then you're able to pay that off. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's totally 100% correct.
So what would you tell, let's say, a pre-med student who's just about to start medical school and is about to take out a massive amount of student loans? What are some of the things that you recommend they're thinking about?
Well, it's really important to do what you can to have take out federal student loans in your name. So avoid private student debt. If you can, avoid having your parents take out loans in their name for you, called Parent Plus loans. See if you can avoid that too. So you'll traditionally have, federal Stafford loans, federal Grad Plus loans, and stuff like that. And if you can stick with that, then that will open up your world to be a lot more flexible in how you approach repayment once you start residency.
Got it. And then when you do, so let's say like your typical medical student is taking out about $150,000 to $250,000 of student loans, sometimes more, and also depending on undergrad. And then they just graduate and they're about to start residency. Now, what does that conversation look like with you guys? I'm assuming that's when you generally would start meeting with clients?
Right. We want to see it's usually best, I would say, right before graduation, but when
Right.
after matching.
Okay.
So once they know the kind of environment they're going to be working in, maybe after they understand the career path that they're going to take, even if it's not set in stone, just have like a basic understanding of it is really, really helpful. Is there going to be extra years of fellowship or extra years of training?
Mm-hmm.
Then that might be important to know in the consult process. But I would say one of the biggest mistakes that we see when we talk with physicians is that they wait until after residency to get a plan from us. And when residency is actually one of the best times to get started on the repayment strategy, because there's a lot of things that you can do, like I said, after graduating, but before starting your residency to really get set up on the most optimal foot and save a ton of money paying back student loans.
Right. And I'm assuming one of those would be like making qualifying payments towards loan forgiveness as a resident. Is that like one of the strategies you advise clients on?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So with most of the what's called income-driven repayment plans, so these are plans, there are basically two ways to pay back student debt. One way is paying based upon how much you owe. So that would be like the extended plan, the standard plan, the graduated plan. Those, it doesn't matter how much you make, it matters how much debt you have. The other side is called income-driven repayment. So those are the plans like pay as you earn, revised pay as you earn, income-based repayment. Um, just for clarification, that all these plans are called income-driven repayment, but yes, they did name one of those plans
The
income-based repayment, which is
Yeah.
confusing. So,
Maybe could have done better on the names, but we'll let it slide.
right. So, but these payments are based upon how much you make. So as a resident, you can have affordable payments even on the 50, 60K salary that you have, as opposed to when you become an attending making multiple six figures. And
Mhm.
it's really, really important, like you said, because if you're doing just a traditional 3-year residency and you will be working for like a nonprofit hospital or an academia, then those 3 years of low payments, by the time you start in your attending status, you will only have 7 years to pay based upon your higher salary. So it's important to start getting on that track
Mhm.
there. There's also a strategy where one of those revised pay as you earn is one of the income driven plans, and that provides an interest subsidy. So, for example, let's just say that a newly minted doctor has a newly graduated physician entering residency has $250,000 of student debt, and let's just say that the interest rate's 6%. So that would be what, like $15,000 of interest on the loan
Mhm.
that would accrue. But if they start repayment before they start residency, they have zero income. Uh, then they can actually have their payments be zero for 12 months. And
Mm.
those zero payments for 12 months with Repay, the interest subsidy works like whatever interest would accrue on the loan gets cut in half. So instead of $15,000 of interest accruing on the loan when they have zero payments, the Repay subsidy will cut that down to $7,500, which doesn't sound great, but what it does is it lowers the interest rate down to about 3% effectively for that year. And then instead of making student loan payments, they can do things like build up an emergency fund, or like spend money on getting situated in their new place when they move wherever they were matched. Um,
So
and
when
those
is
zero payments.
that's
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry to cut you off. Which year is this? This is like right before
This
residency,
is
or
this
when
is
you're
after
starting?
graduation, right? So like graduating in April or May, but
Uh-huh.
before starting residency in July. So if they can
Right.
start this process in like May, June, then um, most med students, they don't have the time to work, right, and earn an income. So most med students have like zero income. And so if you certify your repayment based upon zero income that you made in the prior 12 months or that you're
Mhm.
making now, your payments would be zero. Um, and then going forward, if you use your tax return as proof of income, which is like the official way to do it when you're certifying income-driven repayment, then if you're making a $60,000 salary, but for half the year, that means that the next year your payments will be based upon only 30,000 of income.
Got it.
So the payments might be like $100 a month, and they'll still get not the full $7,500 subsidy, but they might get like a $7,000 or $6,500 subsidy on their interest.
Got it. So to summarize for the listeners, and this is what and I guess I would be your target market. So we'll see if I was following along. If you take action right away, right after you graduate medical school, instead of waiting until you're ready getting your resident salary, you can be considered, for most students who don't have an income, having zero income, so they're really not paying payments on that first entire year because that's what they base it off of. For the payments will go for the whole year. Then the second year, you're only going to be considering having an income of whatever half your resident salary is. So that's also going to be much lower payments than if, let's say, you were to start doing this when you started residency or maybe a little bit into it.
That's exactly right. So the federal government requires that you certify your income, you prove your income, and you can do it. The most official way is to use your prior year tax return. So a fourth year med student, this spring, before they're about to graduate, they might want to file a tax return showing zero income, assuming they have no income, right? Or just file a tax return so that when they do certify and start repayment, then that income will be based upon the prior year tax return. That's the most official way to do income-driven repayment, and it works very advantageously for med students who are just graduating. And then there was one other point I was going to make. Oh, and then there are other ways. Normally when you graduate, there's a 6-month grace period before you start repayment.
Mm-hmm.
So if you graduate in May, you don't start your payments till November. But if you're going for PSLF or any other type of loan forgiveness, you don't want to wait 6 months to start your payments. You want to start them in July
Right away,
when you start.
yeah.
So you can do something like consolidating your federal student loans and to waive the grace period so that you can start your repayment in July or August at the zero
Mm-hmm.
payments rather than having to wait till November to start getting credit toward that.
Got
So it
it.
just speeds up the process by a few months.
And that's assuming you're going to do, what was the acronym for it?
PSLF? Yeah.
PSLF, which is Public Student Loan Forgiveness.
Yeah, public service loan forgiveness. Yep.
Okay. Can you explain to the listeners, for those who don't know what that is?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll give the broader view where about half of physicians are working in some sort of employment that would qualify for public service loan forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And the other half works in maybe like a private practice atmosphere. And so the ones that are going to work in a nonprofit, like a hospital or like in academia, maybe as a professor or something down the road, public service loan forgiveness means that you have to check 3 boxes. One is you have to have direct federal student loans. So any loans issued, pretty much all federal loans issued after 2010, so even like undergrad loans would be direct already. So that's checkbox number 1. Checkbox number 2 is you have to be on an income-driven repayment plan or the standard 10-year plan, but we wouldn't want anyone to be on the standard 10-year plan to go for PSLF because
Those payments are going to be higher.
Exactly.
Yep.
So an income-driven plan, like we said, pay as you earn, revised pay as you earn, income-based repayment. That's checkbox number 2. Checkbox number 3 is that you have to work full-time at a qualifying nonprofit or government employer. And pretty much all residency programs do fit that criteria. So if you check all 3 of those boxes, then those months of credit will go towards public service loan forgiveness. To get full public service loan forgiveness, you have to have 120 months, so 10 years of qualifying payments. So they don't have to be consecutive, they just have to be cumulative. So for example, let's just say that there's a resident, maybe they tack on a year or 2 of fellowship or extra training to go into a specialty, and then they work in a hospital. They're employed directly by the hospital for 5 years, after fellowship and residency. Those 10 years of payments would qualify. Let's just say that someone took a gap year, maybe that, after residency, somewhere in residency, or maybe they worked in private practice for a year or 2 and then went back to a qualifying employer. Those gap years wouldn't count towards 120 months, but they would just pick right up where they left off when they come back.
Interesting. I didn't realize you could technically take breaks in those payments. It doesn't have to be consecutive. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I was reading when that, I guess I forgot when it started, the program, but only recently was like the first class, maybe a couple of years ago, that all student loans would have been forgiven if they made those 10 years of qualifying payments. And I saw that a large percentage of students, or I guess there were doctors at that point, didn't get the loans like waived because there were some, either it was paperwork, they missed payments and didn't realize. So can you speak to that? Is that stat correct? I thought it was like a really high number that weren't actually having their student loans forgiven.
Yeah, the stat is correct. So, but the problem is there wasn't a lot of information on how to go about doing it. So the people that got denied Well, there's actually like a large percentage, believe it or not, who had no business applying in the first place. They just thought, hey, let me see if I can get loan forgiveness, because
Hmm.
why not, right?
Gotcha.
Um, but the thing is, like we talked about, like I mentioned before 2010, 80% of the federal loans issued were not direct federal loans. They were these FFEL loans.
Hmm.
Those FFEL loans, even though they're federal loans, don't qualify for PSLF. So anyone who has FFEL loans, even if they were making payments for 10 years, not
It doesn't
eligible.
matter. Okay.
Right. The other thing is these income-driven payment plans are kind of new. So IBR was around, I think, around 2007. Pay as you earn came about in 2011, and Repay came about in 2016. So it would be hard to make income-driven payments for that full 10 years because the plans weren't available, they weren't widely known about. And so really, in order to do all this right, you kind of had to have like a friend or family member in the Department of Education that was familiar with this, that could get you started on the right track.
Got it.
Um, and so the way to double check yourself is what we always recommend people do is there's a form called the Employment Certification Form, ECF, Employment Certification Form. And what we recommend people do, residents, as soon as they start repayment, maybe after they have 2 or 3 months under their belt, you send in this employment certification form. Basically, your employer fills it out, says, yeah, Adam worked here for the, from July 1st through, current through November. And then what they'll do is they take that form, you send that form back in, they'll match up your payments, and they'll give credit for whatever payments you've made matching that employment. And so the test is, if they give you those 2, 3, 4 months of credit, that means you're checking all the boxes.
Hmm.
But if some people waited till they got to 10 years and they didn't realize that they hadn't checked all the boxes.
Yeah.
So I don't blame them. I mean, I feel horrible for people who applied and thought they could get it. There's a lot of
Because
that out there.
Yeah, because my concern is, let's say someone's doing it incorrectly. It sounds like nowadays it's a lot more well known how to go about getting the loan forgiveness. But if you're not doing it in the right way, you apply for forgiveness after 10 years and you don't get it, then you were making lower payments, which I'm assuming means your interest is accruing at a higher rate because you weren't paying it down, and then it's a whole mess from that point forward.
Yeah, I know. It's always sad when we hear those stories. I mean, the most important someone can do if they feel like they haven't been on the right track is to do everything going forward to get on the right track.
Right. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And what do you think about like the longevity of this program? Let's say someone's starting now with this in mind. Again, you're paying back your loans at a slower rate, so it'll accrue more interest over time, but you don't care about that if you're going to get it forgiven after all the qualifying payments. But what if in 4 years, like this program goes away, or can it be that it's probably going to be grandfathered in regardless, if you're starting now, let's say?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I'd say number one, the best contingency plan is just saving aggressively on the side. So anyone who's going for
Mhm.
loan forgiveness, whether it's with PSLF or taxable loan forgiveness, going the full 20 to 25 years on their income driven plans without the qualifying employment, the best plan is to just be prepared just in case, right? And if for some reason, government's hard to predict these days.
Mhm.
Um, if some reason they did take it away, at least you have the money to set aside to pay off the loans if you have to. But if it does get forgiven, then you get to keep that extra money. You've got a boost in your net worth. But that being said, I mean, to me, I think any politician that runs on the platform of getting rid of PSLF for people who are currently on track for it or relying on it,
Good point. Probably
it
going to have a tough time.
they're not going to be electable, honestly, because we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars for highly qualified, highly intelligent professionals um, that have a lot at stake. So you better believe that they would really raise hell if
Right.
anyone tried to take it away. That being said, there could be modifications to the program going forward. But even on both sides of the aisle, whenever we see new proposals for student loan legislation, it almost always grandfathers in what
Yeah, if
yeah,
you're up to 65 qualifying payments of your 120, like you should be grandfathered in to continue.
that's what most of the stuff we've been seeing there has been. But like I said, anything can happen, and the best way to protect yourself is just to save
Save
aggressively
more
on the
on the
side and be
side.
prepared. Hmm.
Okay, I like that. So what would you say if we're switching gears away from like student loan forgiveness, et cetera, to refinancing? I
Hmm.
noticed I saw that we were talking off air a little bit about potentially not refinancing during residency. What's your take on on that? And who would you recommend to someone who would be interested in refinancing, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, well, I certainly wouldn't refinance in residency for a number of reasons. One is most residents' debt to income is 3-4 times, so they have 3 to 4 times the amount of debt, maybe 5 times the amount of debt that they than what they're making. And so if someone's going to refinance, so just kind of stepping back, bigger picture, there's really two ways to pay back loans efficiently. One is super aggressive, like refinance, throw everything you can at it to get rid of the loans and pay them off in 10 years or less. That's one approach. The other approach is to do the income driven approach, where you keep your payments as low as possible and maximize the forgiveness, whether it's tax free or taxable loan forgiveness. So if, let's just say, for most physicians who are going to be working in a private practice, or they see them on that track, then probably the long-term plan is going to be to refinance if they
Mm-hmm.
know that their attending physician salary is going to be about what they owe in student debt. Um,
So why wouldn't you then refinance right after medical school, knowing you're going to get a lower interest rate during residency? Is it because you're going to have to pay higher payments during residency? But even still, if you can manage those payments, you're going to be accumulating less interest over time.
right, right. Well, the strategy we recommend for residents who know they're going to be going into private practice is sort of this, and maybe they're going to be in a specialty where they're going to be making enough where they can pay back their student debt. It all depends on their debt to income, but there's this, repay with the interest subsidy, which we talked about before. So we call this repay, then refi. So what you can do is you can get the benefit of refinancing by having low income driven payments plus that interest subsidy, and the effective interest rate on the loan goes from 6.5 down to about in the 3% range without even
Mm,
refinancing. And
interesting.
and you get all the flexibility of being in the federal program. If someone needs to use forbearance, if they extend this COVID forbearance, the CARES Act forbearance, you're in that. So right now, for example, it's zero payment, zero interest.
Right. Yeah. You were hoping you didn't refinance just now. If
Right, right. And some people refinance in February, and unfortunately,
right now they're
before
not getting the
March.
0% interest rates that are.
Yeah, and it's just sort of a timing thing. But all in all, residency, I think it's a great time to set finances up properly and sort of build that financial foundation of emergency fund. Making sure there's no credit card debt that may have accumulated through college or med school, and focusing on that stuff first, because once you get that jump in income, you'll have plenty of opportunity to pay it back. Um, one other thing about student loan interest is that, so in other words, rather than saddling someone with high payments for a lower interest rate, they can do repay, have like super low payments, and have a lower
So,
interest rate too.
and just to clarify that, so the repay option will give you a lower interest rate depending on what your income was for the year. Like that's how they determine the interest rate you're going to get.
Exactly. They calculate it based upon what your payments. So they already know at the beginning of the year what your interest on your loan is going to be. So in that
Uh-huh.
$250,000 of debt, 6% interest rate example,
Yeah.
they know that you're going to have $15,000 of interest charged to your loan.
Right.
Once they know your payments, they know what your payments are going to be. So if that zero payment example, the interest on the loan won't be 15,000, it'll be 7,500, cut in half. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if in like year 2 or year 3 of residency, if their payments are going to be, call it, let's just call it $5,000 for the year. So $5,000 of payments cuts into $15,000 of interest. So basically the loan should grow by $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
But with the repay interest subsidy, the loan will only grow by 5,000. So
Got it. So
whatever
it's
interest
not
was,
changing the interest rate really. It's changing the amount that you have to pay, which then you could calculate what that percentage would end up being in interest.
yeah, it's changing the amount of that's going to accrue on the loan is probably, it's cutting the accrual in
Right.
half. And so like in the short run, if a doctor, if a resident knows that's going to be the case, then the repay, then once they get into an attending physician position, once they become an attending, then they can refinance at that point. They'll have a
Mm-hmm.
higher income. They'll have, the debt won't have grown by that much, and they'll be in a better position to secure a really great interest rate too at that point.
Got it. Because then also they're like more established, maybe have better credit by and hopefully, and that's going to all affect your refinancing interest rate.
Right. I mean, most banks are not going to give a favorable interest rate to someone making $60,000 trying to borrow $250,000 of debt.
Right.
So, but if you're making 250 and borrow and you want to refinance 250, they're likely to do that in a very advantageous way, especially for physicians, right? So that's the reason to wait. Um, Now, one other just thing to mention about student loan interest that makes it different than on any other debt is that the interest it doesn't compound. So like it's not like any other kind of debt
hmm
where let's just say that first year that $10,000 of interest accrues on the loan. Well, the interest is still charged only on the original principal balance. That accrued interest just sits in a separate bucket stagnant. So
Is
the debt grows.
Is
Go
that
ahead.
true post medical school? Because I know that's definitely the case right now while I'm in medical school. It's not like accumulating it, or it's just the fixed interest on the principal. But post medical school and when you're starting residency, that's the same thing.
Yeah, it is. Once someone enters repayment or switches a repayment plan, that accrued interest would capitalize, become part of the principal of the principal balance. But assuming someone's on the same repayment plan, then that interest is just going to sit in a separate bucket. Basically, that interest bucket is 0% interest, and the principal balance is the interest rate of your
Okay,
debt.
got it. That's
So,
good to
so the
know.
debt grows in a yeah. So the debt grows in a straight line rather than like that exponential growth curve of
Exponential.
any other debt.
And that's for all student loans. Like you're just getting that fixed interest, or it's not fixed interest, but it's interest on the principal. And that principal you're saying is going to be, once you enter a repayment plan, let's say as you're starting residency, it's going to be whatever the principal was in medical school plus the interest you accumulated in medical school.
Hmm. That's right.
Good. Makes
I know I'm
sense.
covering a lot of technical stuff, so feel free to. I love
No,
that
I
you're
mean, it's
asking
all
questions
making
along
sense.
the way
I'm just
because
trying to break it down for the listeners in case like it's not clear. But I think this has all been super helpful. So especially a lot of my classmates, and so I ended up taking a gap year. So I'm gonna have I'm gonna graduate medical school in 5 years instead of 4. But a lot of my friends now are about to graduate and start residency, or they'll match in March and then residency. From an investing perspective, what do you recommend for newly minted doctors about to start residency, getting about a 60K salary? Is just the Roth IRA the way to go, or build up an emergency fund? What do you guys recommend usually to your clients?
yeah, it's a great question. So I'd say number one, the emergency fund should be set up. So I would start by just accumulating cash, paying off any credit card debt. That's kind of the financial foundation. Um, Now, when we talk about income-driven repayment plans for student debt, so let's just say that someone's going to go for PSLF, or someone is going to go for, maybe they went to DO school and they're going to have like $300,000 of debt, and they're going to be a primary care physician, maybe a pediatrician making 200,000. Well, in that case, they might still want to go for the taxable loan forgiveness. But if the game is to keep payments as low as possible and maximize forgiveness, then actually, rather than a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, we usually suggest that anyone going for those forgiveness programs goes into a traditional 401k and tries to max that out. And the reason that is because if you look at student loans like a tax, so pay as you earn and revised pay as you earn, it's based upon 10% of your income, of your
So
discretionary.
I kind of see where you're going. If you put it into a pre-tax account where, that's going to lower the amount of taxable income you have for the year, then your student loan payments are going to be less.
Exactly. So think about it like you have your federal taxes. You've got, if you live in New York, so you got your city, you got your state taxes, your city taxes. And so if you put something away pre-tax, you don't have to pay taxes on that income for those three things. Plus, plus you have a 10% student loan tax on any additional money you make. So you're going to get an extra 10% discount in the form of lower student loan payments by putting away money
Interesting.
pre-tax.
Got it. So for most residents, if they're going the route of just trying to minimize their payments because they're assuming they're going to get loan forgiveness, then you would go just traditional 401k, probably set up by the employer of the hospital they're working at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most employers will have, and physicians usually they have, especially if they're working at an academic hospital or university hospital, they may have multiple options. They may have a 403B as well as a 457, and some might have a 401A. And you can put, check with your, tax professional. I'm not a tax pro, but but when someone becomes an attending, they can actually sock away maybe up to, instead of the 19.5 and a 403B, they can do 19.5 in the 403B, 19.5 in the 457. And so they can actually reduce their income by 40 grand while also building an awesome nest egg along the way too.
And that's even going to lower the attendings monthly payments, you're saying, for, let's say they're on their 8th year of student loan forgiveness repayment.
Yep. Yeah. So if someone puts away 40 grand before taxes, pre-tax, that's going to lower their student loan payment by 10% of that, by $4,000 the following year.
Mm-hmm.
When they certify their income, because it takes the adjusted gross income, which is not what your salary is, but it's your salary minus like healthcare expenses and your pre-tax retirement plan contributions.
Yep. And so if you did the Roth, then you're saying that that's obviously not lowering your taxable income for the year, because that's all going to be post-tax money. With that said, do you advise to have some sort of account where we're getting post-tax money, so that way later on in retirement, if you're thinking for physicians, now they have this nest egg also where they're not going to pay taxes on it later in life?
Yeah, we think it's really important to start what's called a brokerage account. So, and what that is it's an account. Think of it like a savings account where it's in your name. It's not a retirement account. You can put in as much as you want. You can take out as much as you want, but it's a taxable account. So any type of interest or gains will be taxed. But what the benefit is that you don't have to wait till you're 60, like you do in retirement accounts, to take out the money without penalties. So, we usually recommend people start just getting in the habit of opening up a brokerage account at a reputable, long-standing firm. They'll set up the investment strategy and just putting away maybe $100 a month into that account, as well as doing the retirement plans. Because this is sort of like your pre-60,
Right. You can touch that money whenever you want. You're just going to have to pay potentially like capital gains tax on it, and the tax it, like that's considered income, right, when you withdraw that money.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would go like definitely getting the maximum match. If your employer matches your contributions, like that's, a definite, right? And then, start a brokerage account with a nominal amount while you're in residency, just to kind of get in the habit. And then 3 is go back and max out your pre-tax stuff if you're going for loan forgiveness.
Got it. Well, so the first one would be any match, but isn't that going to be pre-tax stuff, like a match 401k?
Yeah. So let's say that, your resident making 60,000 and they say if you put in up to 10%, we'll match 5%. So you put in 6 grand and they'll put in 3 grand for you. So your 6,000 just became $9,000
right,
just by doing that. But if you have the ability to put in more, depending on where you live and your living situation, then you would kind of continue up to maybe get up to the 19,500 to max that out as well.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
You were saying do the match first, then put some into like a brokerage, and then go back and then max out the same 401k if you can.
Yeah, and when I say start the brokerage account, I mean just like with a nominal amount, like $100 a month or something like that, just to get it started, and so you don't forget about, establishing your, like if someone wants to retire before they're 60, having money stuck in retirement doesn't help them because you can't get the money without the penalties and fees. The brokerage account allows them to have sort of that bridge financing between the time retirement comes along.
100%.
Yeah. Or if you're saving for a house, like I don't want to buy a house now, but in 10 years, once I become an attending and I know where I'm situated and after I'm married, well, you could maybe take some of the money from the brokerage account there if you have like a 10-year plus time horizon.
Gotcha. That all makes sense. I think I was like pushing Raw too, just to like diversify in the fact that like some point later on, you'll have that one account where the money isn't going to get taxed if you need to take it out.
I think Roths are great. I mean, the thing is with student debt, because if you think of the student debt like a tax, then the equation
that
for
makes
Roth
that makes a lot of sense. What you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, the real equation is like if someone has the same tax rates when they put money in as when they take it out, it actually doesn't matter which one you do.
Yeah, for sure. You have to
but
kind of assume you're
because
going to be in a higher tax bracket, I guess.
yeah, when you're older, but if you're retired and you're 60, you're not going to be making a physician salary, so your income might not be as high. Plus, you have the extra 10% tax in the form of your student loan payment at the front end that makes it more worthwhile to put the money away now, get the tax reduction on student loan payments, and then take the money out at a quote unquote lower overall rate on the way
Right.
out.
Makes sense to me. So if you're going to retire at 65 plus and or even if you're like working less and then you're going to be in a lower tax bracket, you might as well get the money in pre-tax now, which is not only going to lower the amount that you're going to have to pay on a monthly basis because now your taxable income is less, but later on when you take that money out, you're going to be paying less taxes on it.
That's right. Yeah, you got it.
Very good. Makes a lot of sense. Is there anything else, anything else you would recommend that like medical students start thinking about as they're about to enter residency or physicians, or maybe someone who just like feels really lost in the process? How can they find you?
Yeah, so we have great resources on our website for free, including a student loan calculator. We've got blog posts specific to physicians. So what we found is that there's a bunch of different professions that have six-figure student debt. Physicians are one. Veterinarians, chiropractors, physical therapists, you name it. Dentists, obviously, and each one of them have their own unique situations related to student loan repayment and what their careers look like. And so if you go to our website, studentloanplanner.com, you can read articles on student loan repayment specific for physicians. The calculator's there. But if you really want to get like a really in-depth for your specific situation, then you go to studentloanplanner.com/help. So for example, if you know you're going to go for PSLF, you want to make sure you're checking all the boxes. If you're not sure if you're going to go into private practice or if you're going to be a primary care physician and you think you're going to owe more than what you are going to make as a doctor in your specialty or field, then student loan getting a consult makes a whole lot of sense. There are 5 consultants. There's Travis, who's the founder, me, Lauren, Justin, and Megan. And all of us have done over 500 consults and advised on hundreds of millions of dollars of student debt. So anyone can help you with your specific situation.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. This was really, really helpful. I think that honestly, our listeners got a lot of value just from that. But if you do want more and you're about to start this journey of paying back your student loans, definitely go check them out. And thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Adam, for having me. Happy to help.